Reconciliation means to me that the four races coming together and building a relationship with all nations, you know, and that we all work together and make this world a more harmonious place to live in.
Reconciliation. There are probably different levels or different dimensions of reconciliation. Many times when I'm asked a question or when I think about a situation or something that involves our people, I revert back to my uncle's teachings, and I ask him what would he say with this question, and I think about what he would say. And when I did that this time, it took me a little bit further into my grandfather's time, which is 3 generations away. And one of the things that was pretty predominant with the old people, I'll call them the old people, was that they were very autonomous. They were very concerned about being Cree people.
It's mending the ties that bind us, that our connection to one another as human beings, and our connection to the land, our connection to the water, and our connection to those animals that feed us, that keep us alive.
I think that reconciliation is important for one simple reason, and that is that it's necessary for healing. Even for Indigenous people like myself, and I went to residential school for 9 years, my first 9 years of education. And so I know firsthand what that experience was like, and I know the types of effects that it had on me and it had on other people. In retrospect, it was quite damaging in terms of loss of culture, loss of language, loss of identity, or not really realizing what really we had, what really was at stake. And so for me, it was valuable to learn more about what residential schools were about, to learn more about why they existed, to learn what they were intended to do. And so to me, that made me understand more about my own personal experience. And in doing so, it helped me to reconcile what had happened to me.
The task of reconciliation is one which we've chosen to emphasize here at First Nations University because of the history of very difficult and painful relations between First Nations and settler societies. It's a task where we need to come to understand one another better. We need to share our understandings of history, because very often the histories that we receive in classes do not reflect the experiences of First Nations peoples who were often disadvantaged, marginalized, oppressed. And so we need to come to a common understanding of what's happened and find a way to move forward together in a new spirit, one that honors our differences, that recognizes that difference is a good thing, that we no longer are in a position of attempting to erase or assimilate the language, the culture, the spirituality of any people in Saskatchewan.
The first thing I would say is it's important because we want to acknowledge that with the residential schools, that residential schools are real. They didn't happen 300 years ago. It's very relevant to where we're at right now, and it was very tragic, and it affects all of us, and it is important to understand that. And so that's the past, looking at the past and saying this happened, and this is why we are where we're at, and acknowledge that. And that's where reconciliation comes in the TRC. And then I guess the second one is reflection, and that's what we're doing now, is looking at saying there was a failure to protect the children. There was a failure to protect Aboriginal identity, to protect culture. There was a lot of things that went wrong, and that took away identity, language, self, importance, everything that people take for granted. This is my culture, this is my identity. Well, that was taken away. And the thing with the reflection is to also understand that when you do that, the change doesn't happen overnight to get that back.
What it really means to me is that as a Métis person, my history, my family's history, the history of the Métis people will be incorporated so that everyone can know it, can learn it, and can share it. So those histories, I think, being part are what really needs to happen, because in order for us to all have an equal footing, we have to know where we come from and then together figure out where we're going.
It means justice. When we talk about reconciling, it means balancing out, finding the truth, finding fairness in all of that. And that equals justice. That's what it means to me, is to have justice in our life, have fairness in our life, and having it applicable to all people that are here, equally to First Nations people and to non-First Nations. And when we can realize and find out the truth and the fairness in that world, then we can begin to look at justice for all.
I don't know how it's going to look, but I think it's important that that we combine the two words, that there's truth and reconciliation. And I think for reconciliation to happen, that the truth needs to come out. And I think that's why it's phrased that way. It's telling the truth of what really happened, not sugarcoating it, not saying, well, we meant well, because that's not true.
Again, goes directly back to the land and water. If the land and water are polluted, there's no reconciliation. That's the great overriding injustice of colonialism, is the pollution of our territories and the dispossession of Indigenous peoples from the lands and waters.
I would like to see a level playing field between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people.